Hi everyone, in this video course, I'm going to show you how to create shadowed floor plans and sections both in Rhino and Illustrator. So you'll either have the option of doing it completely in Rhino, or you can take the shadows that are created in Rhino and overlay in Illustrator. So I'll show you both options. I'm also going to show you how to create high contrast diagrams. I've done it in a previous video, but I'm going to overlap it with this one as well. And so if you see on the right, where it says perspective, I made a custom display style, which I'm going to show you how to create, and you'll get something that looks like this, right? And so again, if you see in plan view, you can keep your floor plan like this in Rhino, or again, I'll show you how to take it to Illustrator and overlay in Illustrator. So let's just go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a custom display style. So if we type in options, and if we go up to where it says, if you go, you see where it says view down here, we're going to click on view, and then on your view, you're going to click on display modes, and then you're going to make a copy of rendered. We'll make a copy of it, and you can go ahead and give it whatever name. I already made one, but you can call it like shadow floor plans or shadow diagram, whatever you like, high contrast diagram, but just give it like a name that you can remember. And then once you do that, you're going to press OK. I already made settings, so I don't have to, but in your instance, you're going to go ahead and press OK. So then what you're going to do next is you're going to go to any of your display styles and activate that. So like mine, I'll activate on shadow drawing. And then I'm going to go back and type in options. And then in options, I'm going to go down and find that display style. So again, you go onto view. Let me just go here on view. And then I'll scroll down and I'll find it. So mine is shadow drawing. Go right here. I have so many custom display styles. So if I go to shadow drawing, for example, now I'm going to show you all the settings that you should do, and I'll explain the settings. So number one, if you click on the main tab of shadow drawing, you're going to go in and you want your background to be white. I want it to always be white. So you go background, you do solid color, and I get a solid color of white. Ground plane settings, I want my ground plane to be on, and I want it to be shadow only, okay? Also checked. You want both of them on and shadow only. And then the altitude, this is your choice if you want it to be automatic. What that means is that if you have a drawing or a model that or a geometry that goes below the 0, 0 point, then that's going to be the lowest plane of your ground plane. If you don't do automatic altitude, you can check it at where you want it on the coordinates on the Z direction, right? So like in your elevation view right here, let me just, like in your elevation view right now, because everything is on the 0, 0 point, my ground plane is on the 0, 0 point. But let's say my model went into like the negative space, right? Like it was like over here, like the model had like a basement, right? Then the ground plane is gonna be at the lowest point like that, if you have it checked on automatic. So if you don't have it checked, you can set it at 0, 0 or wherever you like, and then the ground plane will be here. So it's a matter of preference. So right now I have it at automatic. Now, important thing here is that I want to say shade objects text, but then for color material usage, I'm going to do single color for all objects. So here I'll do single color for all objects. The same thing for backface settings, and I make it white as well. Okay. And now when I scroll down here, this is a matter of preference for the diagram portion. So right now I'm showing the settings if you wanted to do something like on the far right, like if you want to do an axon or like a perspective view in Rhino where you want to show some of the outlines, okay? When it comes to floor plans and when it comes to sections, you don't have to have any of this checked. But again, for the diagram portion, I would recommend having your surface edges checked and maybe your curves if you want to show off your curves like dashed lines and stuff like that. And these are optional, clipping planes, annotations if you want to show off like dimension strings and things like that, you know? But in general, it's again, I need to emphasize this is only for like the diagram view, like a 3D view that you want to keep in Rhino. Okay. When it comes to the plans and elevations or sections, I'll show you again that you don't need to have any of these checked. Okay, really, this is probably the most important thing. To get like this like high contrast white for your, you need to first for lighting method, you need to do scene lighting. That's really important. And then for your ambient color, you want it to be white. Really important. If you do it any other color, it's going to shade in the surfaces. So you want your ambient color to be, this is the most important thing. This is how you get the high contrast of the black and white. So you need the ambient color to be white, all right? So that's just so important. And to be honest, that's like the foundational settings for just making sure how you get this look. Then the other important settings, I'm going to skip down the objects portion and go to the shadows. So for shadows, I definitely want these to be high quality shadows. We're not going to have our skylight checked. Soft edges and edge blurring, that's up to you. depending how far you are, like right now, you see I have edge blurring like ticked a little bit, so it's like a little bit blurred. If I have it on 0, it's going to be super sharp. My personal recommendation is that the more zoomed in you are, I would give it a little bit more blur. But the more zoomed out you are, then it's okay if you have no blurring. Okay? So that's just a matter of preference. But right now I have it ticked right here. It's a matter of preference, but for me, I like them to be sharp. I'm on the sharper end. Let me just reiterate. If you're zoomed out further away from your drawing, it's okay to not have any soft edges or edge blurring. If you're more zoomed into the drawing, then you would want to have a little bit more soft edge and more edge blurring. Self-shadowing artifacts, this makes your shadows closer together or further apart from each other. I always have it on the cleaner portion, okay? Then these don't really matter here. You can keep these on these none. Shadow color, I have it as black, and it's up to you. You can have it a color if you want. You can make your shadow blue if you wanted to. It's not. It's a matter of preference again. It doesn't really matter. But one thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to overlay it in Illustrator, for example, I would recommend keeping it on the black, and then you can change the color in Photoshop if you wanted to. Or if you have a very specific color scheme in mind, then you can go ahead and do whatever color you like. And then shadow intensity. This basically makes it like more opaque or less opaque, depending on how you like it. You see, this would be like a light blue. You see, so again, I keep my shadow intensity at 100 always, and for this example, I know it looks cool in blue. All like architectural drawings look cool in blue, but I'm gonna keep it in black for now and do okay. Now, another important thing to keep in consideration is your shadows. Ignore. I actually have this unchecked when I'm using clipping planes. If you have this checked and you have like an overhang, like a ceiling covering it, it's gonna show the shadow of the ceiling. You don't want that. So if you're gonna have like a clipping plane and you want to use this, I typically have this unchecked when I'm using my clipping plane. Okay, and you'll see. I'll show you when I have my clipping plane on. Now I'm going to go back up to objects, and the main ones are going to be curves and surfaces. So for surfaces, I'm just saying single color for all edges, and I'm keeping it black. And you can do use objects width, which means that it's going to use like the layer thickness, whatever line weight you get in layer thickness, or you can do pixels and give it like a value of 1. It's your choice, how thick you want. But I typically like to keep it on a value of 1. The same thing here for naked edge settings. For curves, again, I actually gave it like a light gray color, and I'm saying use objects width. If you don't have that setting because you're like an older version of Rhino, just do pixel width of like 1. Okay. And the nice thing, you see how the curve goes from white and then it goes to the color here. That's the nice thing, because of the ambient color, it'll automatically change the contrast of the lines for you as well. So you see how it's white underneath the shadow, but then it's gray over here. So that's really nice. And to be honest, that's all the settings you need if you want to get like this type of aesthetic. And there's a lot of things that you can do. So like, for example, I go back to surfaces, right, which is all surface edges, just to show you like a cool things you can do. Like I can make this blue, for example. It'll make all of these blue. Just give it some time because of the memory, right? And then I can change my shadows to blue to make it more of like a monochrome diagram, like high contrast monochrome diagram, for example. You see? So it's pretty cool, like for the diagrams. And I'll just do okay for now. And like I can do parallel view. See, even in this plan view here, it's pretty cool, right? And if I do like parallel view, there you go. You see? One other important thing to take into consideration is how I'm getting these shadows. So if you remember in the settings, I said use scene lighting. So if I go to my rendered view here, and if you don't have a rendered, you can just like right click on your settings and find the rendered options, on here. So you see I have rendered right here. But I have my sun checked. Okay, that's actually really important. See, I do not have my skylight checked, just my sun checked, and I'm doing a manual sun. And you can move your sun around, right? Like you see this altitude, like I can have the deeper shadows like this, you see? I can have shorter shadows if you wanted to. I don't like my shadows to intersect each other, right? That's just way too much. I like the shadows to be, like a little bit dramatic, but not too dramatic that they intersect each other like that. So, and you can play around with the direction of it as well, you see? So that's how you do that's how I'm getting my shadows, from using the scene lighting of the sun. You don't have to use the sun. You can use like a directional light if you wanted to, or a point light. But the sun is just the easiest. Okay? So that's really important when you want it for the shadows portion of this. I can do view capture to file, right, and do like a super high quality. So I would do resolution custom, right, and make it quite large. I would also lock the viewport aspect and just make it quite large and scale it up by a factor of 2 or a factor of 3. Okay, and then when I save it as like a PNG. Don't save it as a JPEG. Save it as a PNG. So that's one option. The other ways, if you do like Control P for print, right? And for size, it's up to you what size you want to do. You can do like a custom size if you wanted to, right? And you can do, for example, I would definitely do landscape, and I would do a high resolution, and I would do raster output, and then I would do display color, and then I would do set, right? And set my window and just find like a view that you like this, and then you can just press enter, right? And if I scroll down here, all this is fine. And if you do match viewport display, it's going to match exactly how it looks in the viewport, okay? If you do match pattern definition, it's going to match whatever layer properties you have for your line weights. So that's important to understand. So if I do like match pattern definition, it's going to match, for example, like the line, the dash line, right? And things like that, your dash line, your line weight thicknesses and things like that. So it's a matter of preference which one you want to do. And everything else here is pretty much fine. And then you can just click print, print to PDF. So then now the next one is if we do like the floor plans and clipping planes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the options, and I'm going to go back and change these all back to black. So if I go to shadows, right, and let me just change it back to black. And let me go back to my objects. And let me go to surfaces and make that black. And so for clipping planes, right, I'm doing show fills and I'm keeping it just white. Okay. And then show edge colors, I'm making the edges white as well. You don't have to. You can make it black so that you can find a reference. So like if I do white and I cut my clipping plane with this, you're going to see like no outline basically. It'll just be white completely. So let me go ahead and show you and I'll go back. So if I do, let me do okay for now. And let's go here. So like, see, this one has like, you see how this one has a canopy like this. Let me go to perspective. It has this groin arc canopy. What I'm going to do is I actually have a clipping plane here already active, but let's make another one. Let's do a clipping plane. Right? Okay. So I go up. Okay, this is important that you see this. Okay, so you see right here, do you see how you don't see the vaulted cover shadow? That's because in the settings where I said ignore clipping plane shadows, that's why you have to have it unchecked. But also you see how the fills here are white, you don't see any outline at all. You see that? Even if I go lower, so if I drop this lower and I cut through the walls, you see? You can't even see the cut of the walls, okay? So I want to show you two options when we do this, okay? If you want to stick only in Rhino, you don't want to go to Illustrator, you want to do everything only in Rhino, what I would do is if I go to options and I go back to my display style, it'll always go back to your display style, your custom display style. If I go back to clipping plane, if I change my edge color to black, right? You see now you can see the edge cut right here, right? And I can make this a little bit thicker, like maybe like 2 or 3. Now you see how thick that is? I can make it like 2 maybe. You see? Like that. And we're going to keep going back and forth with these settings, okay? Like that. And then if I go here, I want to activate it in my top view as well. Okay, so if I go to my top view, it's right here. You see? Like this. That's if you want it like that, okay? If I do options again, let's say you don't want the outlines or you want it really light, right? Number one, you can make it like a very light color. Just you want it just for like a reference, right? You can do it like that, like a very light gray, give it a 1. Okay. because maybe you want to underlay this from your Illustrator drawing, okay? You can even go a step further, for example, like in your shadow drawings, or sorry, excuse me, in the shadow, if you go down here, you can have this unchecked too if you wanted to, because you don't need that anymore in the top view or in your section, right? You can uncheck, so it'll be all white, okay? So in this scenario, this is if you want to take it to Illustrator and all you want is like just a very basic reference of overlaying this on your Illustrator drawing, okay? So that's the other option. So I'm going to go ahead now and make 2D, and then I'm going to export this into Illustrator, okay? So for now, I'm going to do okay. And one thing to keep in mind is to have the same view and layout and position of your view captured file in your Make 2D so that it overlays correctly. And one way to really make sure you have that is you just save your view. So if you do named view, right, you can just save a view, like, just save the view. Create a new view and call it, like P1 for plan one or P, whatever, just whatever name you want to give it. And then you can just, like, let's say you mess up, you can just type in P1 like that and it'll take you right back to it. So that when you make 2D and you do view capture to file, they're always in the same place and it makes the overlay much easier. I want to just grab the actual architectural portion of this. So I'm going to go to my layers and just turn off my dashed lines and my dimensions like this, okay? And then I'm going to do view capture to file. You don't have to, you can do other things. I'll do view capture to file. And then I'm going to do okay. And you just save it in the folder that you like. And I'm going to just call this, like FP for floor plan. And I'll save it as a PNG. Great. And then I'm going to check my dashed line again and check the dimension on here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and make 2D of this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just do make 2D of all of this. And for make 2D, I'm going to make sure that I have clipping planes checked. Tangent edges, you don't have to have checked in this scenario. For sure, I want to do maintain source layers. Maintain source layers. Register with preview, you don't have the group output is your choice if you want to. Viewport rectangle, it's going to get the viewport of the actual display, right? And so I'll just do OK. And it's going to show up. It's going to show up in the 2D space. So I'm going to go to shaded real fast. Right, there it is. So if you notice here, this is the viewport rectangle. This is the same proportion of my viewport rectangle. If you remember when we did the view capture to file, it's also going to take this viewport rectangle. So it's a great reference to measure the actual drawing itself when you overlay it. But I actually want to make another rectangle. I want to make one that's maybe like a good reference, like maybe like a 24 by 36. So I'll do a rectangle. I'll do it from the center, and I'll do 2 feet by 3 feet. You can't see because it's all black right now. Let me go to wireframe actually. It's easier to see now. So here it is right here. Let me just rotate it 90. And let me just scale this up. I don't know, scale it up by a scale factor of 24, which is, let me see here. Actually, let's do a scale factor of 48. There you go. So that's like a quarter scale right there. This is a quarter scale drawing right here. Now, so again, this is the actual viewport of, what we're using here, okay? And then this is the viewport of the sheet that I want to scale it with. So then after that, I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to do File, Export, Selected. And I'll just save it as an Illustrator file. I'll call it FP. Now, this is important, okay? I am doing snapshot of current view. If I wanted to preserve model scale, I did not need to do this. But if you do that, you need to make sure that your drawing is like exactly on the 0, point. If your drawing is like off a random spot, when you open an Illustrator at a scale, it'll like fly off the artboard. But I just like to do it this method, which is kind of old school, where I just scale it by the size of this proportionally. This is your choice, CMYK or RGB. If you're on the computer screen, RGB is fine. If you're gonna print it, CMYK. Export viewport boundary, that's the proportion of viewport boundary, right? Hatches, export to solid fills. If you have hatches, I actually wouldn't have this checked, but we don't have any hatches here. Order layers, yes, I always order my layers. Very important, because it'll organize like all your clip and plane lines together, all of your visible lines together when in Illustrator. So now let's do okay. Before I transition to Illustrator, I just want to reiterate that when I started this, my background color for the view was actually off-white. Right now, what you see is an actual white color. I just kept it as an off-white for my previous settings. So I just want people to understand that if you see an off-white in Illustrator, it wasn't like intentional completely, but right here, my background color was an off-white originally. So right now it's a white, but I'll show you in Illustrator how to, modify the backgrounds if you even want to change your background color. I just want you to understand that so you don't get confused. Okay, so here we are in Illustrator. Just as an FYI, if you get a dialog that says you want to update legacy text, just go ahead and update your legacy text. Like for example, I have dimensions, right? So like it comes with this text here. You see? So that's why I had to do update legacy text if you get that dialog once you open Illustrator. If you don't have it, you don't have to worry about it. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to scale this drawing up. Okay, there's two ways of doing this. One way is like I can calculate it by just using this actual viewport right here. So we know this viewport. Let me zoom out. This is the original true 24 by 36 viewport. And if you remember in Rhino, I made a 24 by 36 at a quarter scale, like a scale factor of 48, right? So I could technically just select this like that, and I can just change the width of this, make sure it's linked, and change it to 36, because I know it's 24 by 36, right? If I do that and I zoom out, I can line this up with the viewport, and it lines up perfectly. You see? Oops, sorry, it's just a little snapping and weird. But you see, so now this lines up perfectly with the viewport. That's one way. The other way I can do it is just do it by hand, which is, it's up to you, but it's not as accurate, but it's still pretty accurate. What I would do is I would actually move this. This is the viewport rectangle that we also want. If I do Control Y, it's easier to snap to things because it's just an outline view, right? Like this. And so if I move these two together, right, and I move these to the corner up here like that, and I change my snap point to the top left, right? You see the top left? And I press E for scale, right? I can go ahead and just scale this until that 24 by 36, this one, not this, then my 24 by 36 hits the corner. So I press E like that. It's not gonna be perfect, right? It's not perfect. I don't think it's perfect, but it's like very, very close. It's not that big of a deal to be honest. And then I can do Control Y to get out of there. I personally recommend doing it through the calculation method, but if you want to line up your renderings, it's just so much easier to do that. And what I would do afterwards is I would select the whole thing and just give it a very light line weight, just a 0.1 for now. Okay. And then what I'll do after that is I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to place my rendering on here. So I'll just do a new layer. I'll drag it down the very bottom. I'll call it render. Okay. And I'm just going to drag my rendering into here. So this is the screenshot. Remember the view captured a file and it's in here. You see that? I think this is just more of a display setting on my side of why it has this color, this like off white. I think it really depends on your monitor settings, but honestly, it's negligible because when we modify it on Illustrator, it's going to basically go away. And so right here, you see this is the size of this is actually the size of this. That's why I wanted to keep this. So if I click on this, right, at the 24 by 36 scale, this guy is about 59 inches wide. So I'm going to copy this dimension up here, okay? And I'm going to click on this one and just paste this dimension, right? And if I line this, it'll line up, I think, almost perfectly. If not, it's okay. We can just do it a little bit by hand. And again, ignore the off-white, right? So if I go here, let me go right here. Let me line up one of the columns. Like that. And I think everything should line, you see, everything lines up perfectly. You see? Everything lines up perfectly with all the columns. You see? Honestly, if you know how to use Illustrator, then you're pretty much done. And so after we have the shadows lined up, I'm actually going to turn it off for now, right? And I'm just going to, thicken up these lines, right? So for example, let me actually turn off my dimensions as well. And let's do I know my clipping plane, the walls, right? Like these right here are going to be thick, right? I can select these. Let me give it like a thickness of 2, just like a nice thickness. So it pops a little bit more, Same thing with the columns. I can give the columns a thickness. Select all the columns. I'll give a thickness of 2. See how it looks? Like that. I don't like the crosshairs. It's because I made a drawing because I did a groin column vault. And so that's like multiple columns put together. But in reality, this shouldn't be there. But you can just ignore that for now. I'll clean that up later. And my dash, these are my dash lines right here. You see these guys right here. If I click on dash line, I'm going to select them all. And I'm going to go to my line type here. And we'll make this nothing. And then maybe make this like 6 to see how it looks. Let me zoom in on here. That looks nice, but it's just very light. So I'm going to go back to here and just change the color of this. Make it maybe, also, let me just make it 0.25. And I would make it maybe like 80%. I have such a big screen. I have such a huge screen. Like I have a 4K 36-inch screen or 32-inch screen that it makes everything look so light. So I'm not sure how it looks on your computer. Kind of disappears on my computer. I don't really need this right here. I can delete that, right? And I can go ahead. Let me find anything else that I want to get rid of. I think we're good here. Okay. Let me go ahead and let me fix these columns real fast. It shouldn't take that long. Let me just go ahead and I can show you like a really fast way of cleaning up these. Like if you have mistakes like this, I'll show you a really fast way of cleaning this up. So for example, but you have to be on the current layer. So on this layer, what I can do is I can go ahead and make a rectangle like this, right? Just a random rectangle like that, right? And I can do just, object live. I can go here, select it, do K for live paint, and just select everything, give it like a black, like that, you see? So now it's all like this, and then I can do object, live paint, and I can expand it, right? And I can ungroup it. And once I have that, I can switch it to the outline view like this, you see? And let me just show you what I get. Let me move it here so you see. So you see how I get all of these right here? It's very clean. You see that? So like I don't really need this anymore, right? But I get this right here. And I can do Control Shift G to ungroup as well. Or I can do release compound path, delete that. And I'm left with this, and I can give it a stroke. I think it was 2, right? And I can also give it a fill, like I give it a white fill, like that. There you go. So now you see how it's much cleaner now. So if I go back, I have it like this now. And the same thing with the walls. I can live paint the walls if I wanted to. I could go here. I could either do a live paint, or let me just show you. Let me just hide everything. So now it's just these right here. Like I can join this. So if I do this like marquee selection here, like if I select this one, I can do Control G for join, right? So now this is one. So let me see. This is a good test. You see that I know for sure that's joined, so I can give that a fill of white. Give that a white fill. And I'll do that for all of them right here, right? So I'll just select this and do Control J for join or Command J for join. And the same thing here. Control J for join, right? And so let me it's a good test. Good. I know that's filled up. Do the same test here. I know it's filled nice. So I'll give these a fill of white. I can just do I and sample this like that. Cool. And let me just check this again like that. So we have this and this. This is like, looking below the cut. Maybe I'll make that like 0.25. And That's fine. The black is fine. Again, I have a very large screen, so the resolution is like super high quality, so that's why it's hard to see these lines. But if I zoom in, that's how it looks. I'll turn on my column. I don't need the viewport rectangle anymore. This the view. I don't need that anymore. If you look at our dimensions here, right? If I click here, group selection, maybe the dots. I don't like how the dots are very strong black. I can do select by appearance, right? And so you see how it selects all of these, only the dots. I think the dots are a little too big, to be honest. They will honestly look like columns, but I also want to change the fill color. I'll make it like a gray, like a maybe like a 75% gray. And I don't want to, I want to change the size of them. I want to change the size of these. So if I go here and I do object transform each, it'll do it from its original point. I can do preview as well. So it'll take all of these and transform them in their place. And so maybe I'll transform them to like maybe 70, I don't want it half the size, so maybe like 75% smaller. Let's see how that looks. See, that's nice. So, because I don't want to compete with the size of the columns, doesn't make any sense. So we have it like that. It's not bad. Maybe 65. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, like that. There you go. And the same thing with the text. The text is, I would say, a little too big. If I do select text objects, text objects, I can do again object transform each, or I can change the size of the text. I can do transform each, right? I think that feels nice and report. Maybe you'll do like 75%. Like that. There you go. And again, I can select that, select all the similar line weights for these, make it 0.25, and give it maybe a 75% also, like this. And now if I turn on the render layer, remember, that's still here. It's right there, right? It's still here. And I can give this like a slight opacity. Maybe you don't like how sharp the shadows look, right? Maybe the shadows are just a little bit too sharp, right? I can give this an opacity. Like maybe I can make it like 80%, you know? There you go. You see? So this is like the floor plan with the drawings over it. I need the dash lines again look really light because of my screen. If I make them really heavy just to exaggerate them, I'll make it like, I don't know, 0.75, just so you can tell. There you go. You see? So that's just basically how you get your shadows into your floor plans and from Rhino into Illustrator. It's a very simple process. And I'll show you final exports. And the same thing would apply to sections. One other helpful tip is like your layering and your transparencies. So on here, the very bottom layer is your render layer, right? But let's say you want something even underneath your render layer. Like you see how this is an off-white and we want it like maybe a solid white background. What I can do is I can create a solid white. So right here, maybe we'll call it like background. And then I can just put in maybe like a solid black, and I'll show you the layer settings that we can use to blend it. So that's like a black, right? And then if I click on the rendering, I can go to either up here, window, and go to transparency. Sometimes they call it effects, depending on the version you have. And I can go to my transparency here, and I'll change this. You can either change it to screen, or you can change it to hard light. So if I do screen, you see, it brings it back to that solid white background, or I can change it to hard light. You see the shadows are a little bit darker, okay? And also you see my transparency or opacity is at 100% of the original rendering, okay? You don't have to do this, right? This is just like, just in case maybe you mess up, or, I mean, you can always go back to Rhino and just re-screen capture it with the correct color background. Or maybe, for example, like you intentionally want to have like a color background, like a pink background. So let me go here and just let me lock this. Maybe instead of this, we'll make this like a pink, like a soft magenta or something like that, right? Like this. And then what I'll do, let me unlock this and then go back to here and maybe we'll do multiply. You see? Then you can have like a pink background, for example. So there's a lot of things that you can do even in Illustrator with your blending options, just in case you want to add another thing to it. So the next thing that I want to show you is how to do the same thing but in section format. And to do it in section, you actually need to tweak your display settings a little bit more because now you actually have to change the ambient color and you have to incorporate a skylight color as well. So let me just go back to options. And I made a duplicate of my shadow drawing, okay, or I guess the shadow display style. I made a duplicate of it and I call it shadow section. Again, if you forgot to make a duplicate, you just go back to your display modes and you find the display style you want to copy. So shadow drawing, you just make a copy of it, okay? So I made a copy of that, right, for shadow section. And what you're going to change is your ambient color. You're going to make it black. So for the shadow drawing one, if I scroll down, you see the ambient lighting is scene lighting, ambient color, white. For the section, it's going to be scene lighting, ambient color, black. That's important because your ambient color is the color of the interior spaces, right? And the colors that bounce off the interior walls and things like that. When you're doing it in plan view, you're kind of, you can also do it that way, but in plan view, you're mostly, you want to see the casted shadows on the ground plane, right? You're not seeing surface shadows along walls unless like your walls are angled and tilted. So it's really important to understand. So for the section, we're gonna make the ambient color black, okay? And you can follow this, all the other settings can be the same. It's a matter of preference if you wanna do this in Rhino and Illustrator. I'm gonna show you the overlay method in Illustrator. So you don't have to worry about any of the edges here if you don't want to. You don't have to have them active, you know, no curves, nothing. So you can have it like this, and then I'll just do okay. And what I'm going to do here is if you see my skylight, I actually activate my skylight. It's really important that I have my skylight activated. So I activate my skylight and it's your choice how dark you want this to be. If you want it a little bit lighter, you can have it a little bit lighter, right? Honestly, I prefer it to be a little bit lighter, but if you want that like very strong contrast, like floor plan black and white and section black and white, then yeah, you want the skylight to be pretty like almost zero, you know, if you want that just that very stark black and white. But if not, you're gonna start to bump up your skylight a little bit. That's why you need it active, right? You see how when I uncheck it, it's there. The other reason why we're getting this shadow here, again, remember the sun settings over here, the sun settings, I actually boosted up the intensity. If I go below 1.5 intensity, it'll start to make the walls a color. Again, this is because I want to overlay this in my Illustrator drawing, and I want it to be like a stark black and white drawing. I don't want any other shadows there. So, for example, if I go here, you see how you start to see this as like a gray tone, right? If I go even less, you get what I'm saying? And the same thing, if I increase the skylight color, it's gonna make even more of a gradient of a shadow. So if you want like that stark black and white, then you need to increase the intensity a bit until I think around 1.5. You see, it's still like a little bit light gray. Once it's around like 1.5, that's where it gets just like a stark black and white. You see? And then again, you can play on with the angles and stuff like that. You see, to get the angles that you like, right? Let's do cancel. All right, that's really important. And then, my clipping plane is just a regular clipping plane, and I make sure that, I have it in the view that I want. Again, I think in sections, the stark black and white, it can be a little bit tricky with the eye. That's why sometimes it's good to just make it just like a little bit light, like that. So it's just a matter of preference, whether you like it or not. There's nothing wrong with it, whichever method you do. And again, when you view captured a file, you want to make sure your make 2D and your view captured files in the same place so that it makes the overlay much easier. You don't have to do, but it's just much easier. One thing I'm not sure because maybe my screen is just a little bit too high resolution. You see, like there's almost like this like gradient over here. That's why sometimes if you do a stark black, it'll turn it off for you, which is good, and then you can change the opacity in Illustrator instead. So I want to show a more complex cross section. I think the first one I showed was just more simplistic to understand the concept. This one I want to show it with like a couple other elements. One of them being like blocks and meshes. In the previous video, I made a previous video that goes into a lot of detail about how you can play with assets and meshes in Rhino and how to display them. This one is going to be a little bit just more of a summary. But in this scenario, if you look here, this is like a more complex section compared to the original one I showed you, and this is it in perspective view. You see, so this is like a made up space, so don't think it's like anything substantial. I just made this up for example, right? And so if I go into my options settings, I want to show two things. I want to show what I'm doing with my shadows and what I'm doing with the mesh options. Okay, so if I type in options, and then I'll go down to my display style that we made. It's called shadow drawing. Okay. Now, for objects, if we go to meshes, you see here the two major mesh settings that I'm playing with is the mesh edge and the mesh and the naked edge settings. These are the two that I'm really playing with, okay? And so I'm using a single color for both. So like if you're gonna do like a monochromatic blue, I would change this to like a dark blue and a light blue. But this is like black and white, so I'm changing this to like a black and a gray. So like for example, the tree trunks, which would most likely be the naked edge settings, is going to be on the black, and then the leaves are going to be on the light because the leaves have way more edges that you can't see. So that's just one very important thing when it comes to meshes. I would not go any thicker than this, by the way. Like this is, I'd never go more than this because it keeps it nice and light and thin because meshes can be a little messy. So one really good example is actually if you see this bed block down here, this is actually a really bad example of a block that you don't want because there's just way too many triangles. So you want to try to find a pretty simple mesh that you can use. Like actually this tree mesh is actually more simple than this bed block, for example, or even this little plant that you see here is more simple than this bed block. So this is like a bad example of types of blocks you don't want to have in here, okay? And again, this is in the scenario where you only want to stick in Rhino, right? If you're going to take it into Illustrator, I would actually recommend not to screen capture or view capture to file the blocks in this view. I would just keep it only on Make 2D when you overlay it. And I'll show you the Make 2D and how I overlay it in Illustrator as well. But I just want you to understand this is very important when it comes to mesh settings, okay? And let me just go back for the lighting because for that more simple gable example I showed you, I made the ambience black, right? So if I click on the main setting for here and I scroll down, I made the scene lighting black, right? So if I go here and go to here, I made this completely black and just give it time to upload. But you see now how the shadows are just very strong. Everything's like very strong here, okay? That's a matter of preference. Personally, if you're gonna do like a perspective section, I would actually keep it a little bit lighter than this. I wouldn't make it like this because it gets a little too strong. I mean, it looks cool. It is a matter of preference again, but I think it's a little bit too strong. So I would just make it a little bit lighter, like maybe 70 or 60, whatever you prefer. If you're gonna do like a perspective section, you know? Oh, yeah, I did it at 60. Yeah, so maybe go even less than like 60 or 50. I think that's where the shadows are not as intense. And again, as a reminder, if you don't like the edges, you can update the edges on your shadow settings. So if you'll go down to my shadows, I can update the edge blurring if you wanted to, right? To make it just a little bit softer. You don't want to go too crazy with this, but you can go, around like this area, like the first third, I would do it. And then for the clipping planes, again, I'll show you some more things, but like, you can play around with the fills. If you're going to take this to Illustrator, I would actually not have any fills on this, and I wouldn't even show the edges, to be honest. I would just have, you can keep the fills as white, and that's it. And even for here, if you're gonna take it into Illustrator, it's really your choice if you want to show these edges. Like I actually wouldn't. I wouldn't show the surface edges. It would just be basically like all white. You see, it would just be like that. And then you're just overlaying it underneath your Illustrator drawing. Okay, so this is really important to understand. If you're going to take it to Illustrator, my preference is that I would just keep it like, without any of the edges. So it's just pure shadow and fill, and you just underlay it in your Illustrator. If you're going to keep it in Rhino, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but it's just good to emphasize. You can keep it in Rhino, then yeah, show your edges and show your curves you want to, and show the meshes and stuff like that. Okay. So for example, if I go to this view right here, you see? So what I want to do here is I actually want to save the view. I'll do named view, and I'll make a new view and I'll call it like V6 or something. So view 6. So, if I pan away like this, I could type in V6 and I'm good to go. And the reason why I do that, again, so that I have a good reference when I make 2D and I view captured a file, I can just overlay them on top of each other and they'll line up perfectly. Like I know exactly that they're going to line up exactly with the same proportions. So before I do view captured a file, because I want to make 2D, the blocks and everything with it, I'm going to do make 2D first, okay? That's the first thing that I'll do. And just press enter, and then yeah, do maintain source layers, get the view, tangent edges is fine, all these are fine, and then just do okay. And it'll show up on the top view. And typically I just type in group to save everything at once. Again, I typically like to group my make 2D. Now, after I make 2D, again, I personally don't want these blocks on here because it creates an underlay issue, especially with like really messy blocks like this bed block. Again, this is not a good bed block. This is actually a block you don't want to use. So like I would actually like, hide that, for example, before I do view capture to file. I think the trees, it's really up to you if you want to keep the trees or not. It's not that big of a deal. The trees, because they're already like very organic, but like the chairs, the furniture, I would actually not have them on here. I would actually go to wireframe, and it's just easier to select. And I would just hide this. And go back to my view style, which is just shadow drawing. Like that, that's fine. And then this one, I would do view capture to file. And the same settings, just make sure you lock your viewport aspect to this right here. I want it to be this. And if you don't have it, again, as a reminder, start with viewport, then go down to custom, lock it, and then I always upscale to 4,000, and then upscale by 2 times, and I do okay. And I save it as a PNG. And that's it. And again, this would be underlaid. This is going to be underlaid from your actual Make 2D in Illustrator, okay? And again, because we're taking this into Illustrator, I don't even need these outlines here, I don't need these outlines, but it's a matter of preference. You want to keep them, they're good references, but that's basically it. I just wanted to show a more complex section. And so I'm going to transition over to Illustrator and I'll show you, how both of them look, and how you can quickly change both of them. Okay, so here we are in Illustrator, and I'm just going to go through the exact same process like I did for the previous floor plan in that simpler, smaller section. I just want to reiterate the process so you understand the workflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in that screenshot. I can just drag it in here like this. Okay, and if you remember, the viewport of this screen capture is the same size as the viewport of the Make 2D, so I can just match the sizes of both of them if I wanted to. So if you remember, this viewport right here matches the size of the viewport of the rendering. Let me just grab this rendering here. I'm going to just cut it, and then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'll put on the very bottom. I'm going to call it rendering. And then I'll do Control F to paste it in place. And then let me just turn off some layers to make it go faster. Okay, so if you see this right here, I'm going to grab this dimension, this width dimension, just copy it. And then I'm going to click on this, and then I'm just going to paste it here to match it. So it'll scale it down like that, and then I can go in here, and I can literally just match this viewport if I wanted to. And from here, you can go ahead and like scale it up if you wanted to, or scale it down, but I always like to overlay it first. And I mean, you can scale it up and then overlay it, but I like to overlay it and then scale it. But I showed both ways, both methods of doing it. And these sections don't, or excuse me, these shadows don't look high quality because I'm zoomed out. But if I zoom in, the shadows are actually really nice. The edges are nice. It's just when I zoom out, it's just it gets more pixelated just because I'm zoomed out. But that's not how it looks. It's actually very smooth shadows when I zoom in. It's more sharp. Okay, so once I have that established, I'm just gonna hide this because we'll come back to it later. And then I'll just start doing my line weights, and I always like to start with my section cut. So let me just always start like with the major walls, for example. So I'll just turn everything off, right? And just start with these walls that I have here. And I always just like to select them and do Control J or Command J to make sure they're all, they're all closed walls. So I can switch the fills very fast, And so here I'll probably give them like a thick line weight, like a line weight of 3. Like that. And maybe I'll give it like a nice fill color as well. Maybe I'll give like a light blue fill color, like a cyan or something like that. Just we'll see. We'll see how it looks. But I want to get like a nice light cyan, maybe like a 15, like that. And the same thing with this. Give that a 15. Oops, I just did the stroke. Sorry, let me switch it and give that a line weight of like maybe like 2. Make that black. And let me match. So I can just do I to match properties. Like that. I don't mind that this one isn't completely closed because this is just like a very thin piece. That's not a big deal. Make that 1. Just have some hierarchy. Like this. And I mean, it's a very basic section, but once we have that, we'll go to the next one. So I guess the next major one is this one, the ground one here. So I want to do the same thing. Let me just do Control J, make sure. I'm pretty sure they're closed, but I always do Control J. And then I can just go ahead and do I to match it, you know, like that. Same thing for my ground here. I can do I to match it, like that. To be honest, this is actually bothering me after looking at it. I should actually connect it. Let me just hide this right here. And let me just join this. This is actually bothering me. I don't like that it's not connected. I like things to be very consistent. Okay, so you see I select that Control J. I do Control Y outline view sometimes to make things easier to select and look at. I can select this to lock it, like Control 2 to lock it, so that when I select this, Control J, and then do Control Alt 2 to unlock. Control Y. And I want to give this a fill, match it. There you go. It was just bothering me. I don't like how it was not consistent. All right, cool. So we have that. And so I think these are the major cuts. And then let's see, these are like the background of the walls. Like so I can select them all like that. I think that's fine. I'll maybe make it 0.2, just like a little bit thicker. 0.2. Leaves, for sure. This is going to be a big one. So this like, takes a lot of memory. I'll keep it at 0.1 and maybe make it a little bit lighter. Like make it 75% gray, like that. And then I think these are like the blocks. Again, I don't like this bed block, okay? It's not a good block. I just put it in there as a placeholder. It's actually not good. I would actually make this like an 80%, and I would make it 0.2 just so that it has some strength to it. These are, I think, more blocks. Yeah, those are the chairs. So I would just select them all, do I for the sample tool, and just sample that. These are the tree trunks. Let me turn that on. Very nice. Let me look at them. I'd make that 0.2. Let me see the color. Maybe like 80. Make it a little bit darker than the leaves. Okay. This is, I guess, this was on the wrong layer, but that's okay. I'm missing this piece here, to be honest, but it's okay. It's not a big of a deal. That's fine. It's okay. Okay, this is like, I guess, a piece of, like, a small piece of glass. I'll make that like 0.5 just to make it pop a bit. Yep. Okay. That's the viewport rectangle. Okay, then there's the rendering. So then the rendering, like, I wouldn't make it this dark because I feel like it's a little too dark. I would actually make it like maybe 50%. There you go. So now I see it comes to life a little more. Even like you can go 40 if you want to, like that. So now there's some nice hierarchy. You see? Again, when I zoom in, you see when I zoom in, the shadows look much better when I zoom in. When I zoom out, it looks more pixelated. So just keep in mind. Yeah. I could go in and fill in these chairs, but to be honest, it's not that big of a deal. I think it's really just reading the depth and having entourage. I would definitely have entourage though. I would definitely have entourage on here. I should have deleted this back portion here. I should have deleted that because that's actually glass. I shouldn't have made that a surface. I should have just deleted it so you could see beyond. So it gives it even more depth. So keep that in mind. Like if you have openings like in the elevation view, you should see even beyond that to give it more depth. So this is like a mistake in my part. Like I should have not have a surface here. It should be looking beyond, and maybe I see vegetation here as well because it adds more to the depth and the play of the section as well, you know, to show like these like multiple openings in the section. Like there's like courtyard, surrounded courtyard section, you know? So that's basically it. And you know, once you establish that, you can actually have a lot of fun with it. So like this is like one type of section we can do, right? Like another type of section is we can make it monochromatic. Like in this scenario, it's basically like a blue fill with like black line cuts, right? But like we can have fun with it. We can do it so that maybe the whole thing is blue, like blue lines instead of black lines, right? So if I select this whole thing, maybe I make it so that everything has maybe like a darker blue tone to it. It might take a little bit because there's a lot of like leaves on here. So this is like a little bit darker, I would say. It's hard to read. So we can make it, let's see. I think it should be a little bit lighter. Bring down the magenta a little bit. And then I think it might pop a little bit more. Let's see how this looks. Like this. You can do things like that. I think it should be a little bit darker than this, right? But I think that's also really fun. Like it's a really fun section to do. You know, it kind of makes it more fun to look at because of the play of the shadows and the openings and then these pops of contrast. I mean, maybe the trees I would have kept lighter, to be honest. Like the leaves I would have kept lighter because it's a little too strong in my opinion. Like I would have made it much lighter. Honestly would have made like 10 cyan and nothing for magenta, to be honest. Like that. Starts to look like snow, to be honest. Um, so like that's an option. Another option is like you can play with the background and even play with the layering, like I showed you in the other one. So for example, if this is the viewport rectangle, right? I can like maybe make this like a really dark blue. I have to switch it though. This looks like this is a purple though. Make it a little bit darker. Let's see, we can punch the K like that. Maybe less magenta though, so it's more blue. There you go, like that. And I mean, I'm not done yet, right? But like, I would make the strokes of these, right? So if I select the walls and let's see, the ground like that, I can make those so that the color is a little bit lighter. Or maybe give it more contrast actually, like more of a bump. You can do things like that, you know? So there's a lot of things that you can play around with for the sections. And I can also play around with the layering as well. Like if I go here, I can layer this over the rendering. So again, remember that transparency setting? Right now it's on multiply, but I can do on, we can try a whole bunch of different options. But then once you start doing that, then you want to start to play around with like the strokes of the other elements like the furniture and the lines beyond so that they pop as well. You get what I'm saying? So keep that in mind. So once you find like a layering you like, then I would go ahead and start playing around with the strokes. Like you see, this makes the shadows darker. These aren't that exciting. So let me go back to the multiply one because I think the multiply is the nicest one. And so like for example, we could use like this magenta stroke for everything, right? Except the leaves. So like if I go here, let me turn off the leaves. And we already did these already. We already did this one and we did this one, right? Let me lock this right here. So like here, everything else, we can just select it and give it that like magenta color as well to make it pop. And pull this down. Yeah. You know, things like that. And then we turn these back on. So you see, there's a lot of ways that you can have fun with these sections, you know? I personally actually like it when it's like all blue. Me, like I like things to be just like super monochrome. I always like monochrome styles. So that's my personal preference. Like, let me just go back to it and show you. Right? I mean, this isn't bad either. This is pretty cool, this section right here, when you do it without it. That contrast is really nice. But then the other option would be to just make these all blue, make all the cuts blue. But yeah, so you see, that's how you can go in and illustrate, like, overlay the Illustrator and the Rhino to get these really cool sections. And if you want these to like connect, like you see how there's like a sharp line here. If you want this to connect, you can click on this and this and this, and then you can go to something called Pathfinder. If you don't have it, if you go to Window and you go to Pathfinder right here, right? So it'll pop up right here. I can merge these. You see where it says like Unite? You see how now it like connects as one like that? But you see how this gets lost? Like this gets lost a little bit in the shadow. So you got to be careful with some of these things. I actually like the other one, but I like the color scheme of this, which is pretty cool. It's just that it gets a little bit hard to see. You have to make things a little bit darker and thicker, you know? Like you see how this gets lost a bit? You want to make these a little bit darker. But yeah, I mean, this is the basic way of like overlaying the sections. So I showed you the plan sections, and then I'm going to transition back over to Rhino and show you like clipping plane axons and plane diagrams. And then we'll just wrap it up and show you final exports. I want to quickly show some nuances that you can add to these drawings. So this is, like an axonometric, right? You can keep it like this where the shadow and the shading is just very stark contrast of black and white. The one things that are missing that I want you to keep in mind is that you see, in reality, there should be a shadow cast on the interior curvature of the surface, right? It shouldn't just be going underneath. It looks like it's floating. If you want to show, I guess, a little bit more accuracy in your shadow, you can just slightly tweak your ambient color of your lightness of the scene lighting. So for example, if I go down to the shadow drawing display style, and if I go here, scroll down to the scene lighting, remember we had it as white if you want it to be a stark black and white for your plans and for your axons. If I bring this down a little bit, maybe it's like just like a light gray kind of like that. Let me show you what starts to happen. So do you see how you start to get a little bit of this interior shadow, but it doesn't become like stark black and white anymore. Okay, it's just impossible, right? Because you need to see a contrast, so you're gonna get a little bit of the lightness here happening there. So if you do want to get a little bit of interior shadow, like in your axonometric diagrams, like this, then you're gonna want to show it like that, right? You need to increase your ambient, or I guess decrease the ambient lightness. So see, so mine's around 60. I think once you hit like a threshold of like 60 or below, it'll start to show up more. I think if you go beyond 60, it kind of disappears. So that's just something else to keep in mind. Yeah. So like, yeah, I think you want to hit it around like 60 or below is like the safe spot. If you want to start getting like those interior shadows of the surfaces in your diagrams and things like that. But it's a matter of preference. Maybe you don't want it. You want the stark contrast. And so let me just quickly show you other aspects like, yeah, different colors, because I did like a blue color scheme with the exact same thing. The only difference is that I did like a blue option for my shadows and for my curvatures. So you see for shadows I made them blue, and then my curves I made them blue, and then surface edges I made them blue. Again, this is if you want to do it straight out of Rhino and you just want to take a screen capture to file. If you were going to do overlay it in Illustrator, then you really don't need to have any of your surface edges or curves checked, because you're already going to do your line weights in Illustrator, and all you would need to do is make sure your shadows are blue only. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But let me just show you the blue version of this. And I think the blue version, I have it not as a stark one. Let me just keep it. Let me make it stark blue and white just to show you. So I'm going to do shadow blue. Shadow blue. You see? I really like it as the blue, to be honest. Let me change my dimensions, make them blue as well. I think this looks really nice. Let me make it a little bit darker. You see, and then I'll show you how it looks like when I increase that ambient lightness. There you go, you see? If you want that in there. So it's just a matter of preference, to be honest. Again, like I said earlier, I'm gonna show you final exports of these. Another thing that I'd like to share is if you do like the clipping plane diagram, like an axon clipping plane diagram, you see on the clipping plane option down here or whatever display style I have. So for the blue version, the color usage, I should show fills, and I gave it like a little bit lighter than the actual blue shadow color. I can give it the same, you don't want to give the same color because it's hard to tell. Make it a little bit darker, but you don't want it the same color as your shadow, okay? And see, because then it starts, becomes hard to tell what's shadow and what's wall cut, you know? Again, this is only if you want to do it only in Rhino, but I wanted to show you this option as well. And I don't have show edges checked. You can if you want to, but I typically like to match the edges with the color anyway, so that's why I like to do show edges. Or I don't do it if it's going to match the poche, but it's a matter of preference. If you wanted contrast, you can show it if you wanted to. So just keep that in mind. And again, this is the blue version. The original version we did on earlier, right? The black and white one. You can do the exact same thing. Like if we go to clipping planes, we can do the color usage. We can make it, I guess like a darker gray, like that, or maybe like a lighter gray like this. And we can uncheck this if we wanted to, just to show you how it would look. And do OK. And we can switch it to that one. You see how it's like gray and then it's black, right? So you can do like that as well if you wanted to. Just wanted to show you that option. One other thing that I wanted to show about the diagrams and the colors is if I do print display, right, and you have your state on or off. If you have your state off, you see how it gets a little bit darker. It's not as like fine. If you have your state on, right, it's going to show you more of like the final product output. And then if you do color display, that's going to show you the color that you want it to be selected as on your display settings. So like for example, if your layer is blue, or if you made your display settings show curves as blue, that's what it's going to do. If you do color as print, it's going to show what you set on your layer properties, the layer properties. So I always have my color as display, right? And that's about it. And again, this gives you like a kind of like an accurate, not 100% representation, but like an accurate representation of the final export and press enter. And it makes things just a little bit more fine tuned. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you final exports. I have these as JPEGs, but I recommend having them as either PNGs or TIFFs. And I have it at 300 dpi. I just have it as a JPEG because I have a lot of files to show you. No, it won't take up too much space. And I'll zoom in and out, but a lot of these are either taken from Rhino or Illustrator. And I'll tell you which ones are straight out of Rhino and which ones are straight out of Illustrator, okay? So this first one you see here, this is pure Rhino. I just put it on InDesign to do the layout. That's all I did. And so if you zoom in, I mean, I'm only at 35%, but if I zoom in on here, like the quality, it's excellent quality here. And so remember, this was the setting where I showed you if you want to kind of bring down the ambience to get the interior reflection of the shadow, okay? And again, everything you see here, all the settings have been covered in the video. So it's not like anything new I'm showing you for the final exports. This is another one. This is the black here. And again, if you notice for the section cut, I'm making the section cut a little bit lighter than the shadow. You can do the inverse where you make the section cut dark and the shadow a little bit lighter, but you do want to have a little bit of difference so that it doesn't blend in as one thing, okay? And again, this is the off-white background I was talking about earlier. I'll show you the actual like true white background as well. See, this is the true white background here. It's a huge difference, right? So one of them was a little bit softer in the eyes. This one's like very stark graphic contrast, And so this one, I have a black section cut and like a dark gray shadow, okay? So it's a matter of preference. You see, I zoomed in, you can see the dash lines. It's just that I have a really big screen. I'm not even at 100%. This is 91%. My screen's like 32-inch 4K. So you can tell that this is very high quality, even as a JPEG, okay? And this is a very basic example. I'm going to show you more detailed examples. This is more of like an oblique shot. And I made a separate video about obliques if you're curious. This is the blue. Again, I think the blue is just super fun when it comes to architectural drawings. I think it's just so fun to look at. And it adds a lot of emphasis to your design. When you do things that have a specific color scheme, it actually makes you focus more on the actual design itself. You just have to find a good balance of not being too distracting with your work, right? But like this, it just makes you more intrigued with the design. And again, pay attention. The section cut is a little bit lighter than the shadow. So just, again, I have to reinforce that. If you're going to have this types of drawing, you need to have a slight differentiation between your section cut and your shadow, okay? Okay, now these are like plans, Axon plans, you see? Again, this is all Rhino, straight up Rhino. The only thing I did, again, layout, text, and InDesign, that's all. Layout, text, InDesign, straight out of Rhino. And I'll show you just to prove it to you. And again, all of these settings I've already covered in this video, so there's nothing new here. But yeah, these are fantastic, you know, if you want to show plan axon diagrams or even just regular plans. This is the blue version. You see the difference between the blue and the black? There's just a very, the black, again, there's nothing wrong with the black version. I think it's fantastic. It's more technical. I would say the black is like a little bit more serious in its representation, like in its aesthetic representation. It's more about the actual plan itself. But then once you make the drawing blue, excuse me, when you make the drawing blue, it adds a little bit of playfulness to the drawing, and your eye kind of wanders a little bit more and plays around a little bit more with the actual space. Whereas the gray or the black, you're kind of looking at it systematically in order, you know. These are sections, again, axon sections. And let me just go to Rhino real fast, just so I can show you that this is actually straight out of Rhino. You see, this is straight out of Rhino. Nothing, like no tricks. And again, these are all the settings that I showed in the video earlier. So this, you know, I'm just really trying to show off the space, you know, that's all. Like the openings, the contrast of the opening versus solid. Blue version. I can zoom in just to show you. It's another angle. This is straight up Illustrator. This is the very first thing I showed you. This is straight out of Illustrator. Okay. This is just pure plan Illustrator view. And you can have fun with these too, you know, change the colors of these. This is straight out of Illustrator. So I took the shadows from Rhino and I put it in Illustrator. In this setting, I remember earlier in the video, I hid the chairs in the bed. You don't have to, you can keep them on here, but I would make sure the lines are very light, you know, so that when you underlay it, your vector doesn't show up. Okay. But these are for people who like to do an Illustrator and have more of like a line graphic effect more than like a rendered look. Do you want it to look more like line work? This is an example. And this is all, so like this text is Illustrator, the dash line Illustrator, the overlay is all Illustrator. So the underlay of the is just the rendering from Rhino. That's it. And I'm just using Arial. Like this font is just Arial. That's all it is. With like a big track, like a 200 point tracking. Illustrator. This is just, you know, screenshot from Rhino underlaid on an Illustrator Make 2D. Illustrator. Illustrator. When it's just like, I guess, gray or black and white, sometimes you got to punch down the line weights because it can get a little bit heavy compared to the color overlays. So just keep that in mind as well. This is straight out of Rhino, just laid out in Illustrator, or laid out in InDesign, excuse me. The nice thing about adding shadows is that, number one, it gives you a sense of depth to your space. Number two, it allows people to understand the contrast of light and dark in your space as well. And it helps people visualize quite quickly your, I guess, like spatial organization from a massing perspective when you show shadow in your drawings. You just don't want the shadows to be too overwhelming or distracting. That's all. Other than that, I think shadows are just a very fantastic way of conveying a lot of spatial elements in your drawings. Like this here is more graphic. I would say in certain instances, I would say specifically sections is where it really helps. Like the flat sections is where the shadows help a lot. You know, out of all the drawings, I would say sections with the shadows help very much. And plans where the plans have a lot of push and pull, a lot of play of like push and pull, maybe like basement level or like open to below level. I think that's where it helps. But if you have a very dynamic section, shadows help a lot. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, please like and subscribe. I really want to help this channel grow. And again, you know, everything here is for free. I really want to just give free content, no gimmicks, just help people out in the design industry and in design and academia. So please spread the channel, and I will be uploading more content. I really wanted to focus on drawings and drawing styles for the past couple of videos. But yeah, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments or questions, leave in the comment section below. Thank you.